to the Kiwanis convention at the end of June, and this is just a summary presentation of our experiences in Orlando and our way of thanking the club for paying for the registration to enable us to go and represent the club at an international convention, which was held in Orlando at the end of June. So here we are at the exhibit hall. They had a lot of really great things in there for sale, and it was really good to see some of the special projects that different clubs had sponsored and different nonprofits. So we took several classes, and I wanted to talk about this a little bit because there's an exciting opportunity that Kiwanis has with Hilton Hotels I'm going to talk about in a minute. But we learned some really interesting things that I think could really benefit this club. One of the classes I took was in crisis communication. Actually, it was pretty timely because you might recall the town of Berlin had a chemical spill at the end of June. And so for me, it was very timely to be able to go in and hear basically the public relations director for Kiwanis International talk about how to handle communications in a crisis situation and how you define a crisis versus just an urgent message or a situation. One of the things she recommended, especially in social media, with people posting things on Facebook, is to post what you call a holding statement. So if this club ever got into a situation where something really horrible happened and we needed to act quickly and post something on social media, well, her recommendation was the first step would be a holding statement. Yes, we're aware of the situation and we're cooperating with investigating agencies, or yes, we're aware of the situation and we're looking into it and we'll respond to you shortly, something like that. I was asking her, is there any way to get something that's on social media off of social media? And she basically told me, forget about that. That's not going to happen. So it's a bold new world that we're dealing with these days. She stressed the importance of a social media policy, and I don't know if the club has that or not. If not, I would pass that recommendation on. Something that talks about who gets to post to the club's Facebook page. Do we have a Facebook page? Yes, okay. So who gets to post to the Facebook page? What do you get to say? And my understanding is Kiwanis International has a social media policy that we could use as a basis. So that would be another recommendation. And then third, you don't have to do this in isolation. You can reach out to Kiwanis International and the public relations director will help you. So if there is some kind of really uncomfortable or really difficult crisis, I would suggest doing that. If there's just some kind of situation that you're dealing with, you can pretty much handle it, I think, based on the information that I got from the crisis communication class, or relying on Kiwanis International for support. We have some options there. So another class I took was interview tips. This isn't an interview with me per se, or an individual interview, but how you get the press to interview people in the club, how you get their attention, how you get the word out about the work that the club's doing. And so I have some press release samples, and I've got a newsletter sample, and I've got the business card of the person who taught this class, who's pretty big in Florida and has done a lot of work with the Miami Herald, and also spends a lot of time with his club, Kiwanis. So his recommendation was to make sure that every time you have a press opportunity, you do just like we do, and you have the banner in the photo. Every time I look at the Bayside Gazette or the Dispatch and I see a photo of what we're doing or a presentation someone's given, there's always the banner in the background. In particular, this club had special banners that had photos of kids in it, and his recommendation, this presenter's recommendation, was to put some kind of promotional banner together. We have them at the town of Berlin. If you want me to kind of look into how much that would cost, I can tell you it was very simple for us and not that much money. But those would be good advertisements for the work that the club does, and another way of sort of promoting the club. He also suggested having a tagline, and this, to me, this was kind of funny. He was saying, well, when you talk about your club, don't just say Kiwanis Club of Ocean Pines. One of the most active clubs in the area, one of the most active nonprofits in the area. That gets their attention substantially more than simply the name of the club. So think about a tagline or something that we could include in every communication with a member of the press that would draw their attention and make it more of a focus for them. And then send a press release. To me, this was sort of a technical issue, but for those of us, like I do for the town of Berlin, sending out press releases, it's a good tip. Don't just attach it in the email, but actually embed it in the body of the email. This person's recommendation was to do it that way because people are busy and they won't always take the time to open an attachment. So there's some ideas there for the club. Here's another photo of Mark and I. It was really fun. They had all kinds of little opportunities to do photos and then have little props and things like that. So one of the things Dick suggested to us was, don't just go and work, have a good time. So we're doing our best to follow up on Dick's instructions.
That was tough to follow up on.
So one of the sessions I went to was on volunteering and why people volunteer. And Kiwanis International, I've never gone to a convention, but I think they're really working hard to get a better sense of what their membership's looking for. And they're trying to adapt. They're looking at things like virtual clubs. I've never heard of it. But there are some people who are in virtual clubs where they get on a conference call or they do like a webinar or WebEx, and they never actually physically get in a room together. I think that's kind of strange, but from what I was getting out of this session, that's really sort of the cutting edge of what the younger generation's looking for. People are busy. They feel a lot of pressure to perform at work. They're really not able to do like folks used to be able to do, which is, you know, come and spend an hour or two in the morning during the work week to sort of socialize and also do community work. Instead, they've got to kind of fit it in with everything else. And so this is Kiwanis' way of adapting to that change, is to try to create more virtual platforms and more opportunities for people to connect through the computer, through the internet. They're also moving to treat the members more as clients or customers, and focusing more on kind of what folks are trying to get out of the volunteer experience. And the studies that they've done indicate that people really are joining organizations like Kiwanis to affect change. So they don't want to just necessarily hang out. They really want to have an impact on their community or on their neighborhood. And so having more opportunities to make that change is important. And they're also working on, I thought this was really interesting, because we're much more mobile as a society, Kiwanis is trying to create a tool, I call it an introduction tool, but a method or a methodology so that if somebody from this club moves, for example, to Virginia, there's a way for Kiwanis International to kind of tag that person and tell the people in Virginia, hey, Laura Allen's moving to Virginia and you want to reach out to her. That way they still keep that membership connection even though it's not a member in this club. Kiwanis International still retains that person and that connection. The hope being that the recipient club would reach out to the individual and say, hey, join our club, come to a meeting. I thought this was a really interesting idea. So again, following Dick's instructions, we did our best to exhaust ourselves at all of the theme parks we could get our hands on in Orlando. And I don't know, I think it was 13 hours or something like this. This was early on in the day. 14 hours, Mark says, okay. And then again, I like to run, so I found this as I was running out and about and run Disney. One of the most interesting things that we learned from my perspective is Kiwanis International has got a special relationship with Hilton Hotels. There's opportunities for you as a Kiwanian to get deals through Hilton, and there's a way, if you're a Hilton Honors member, to get to their gold status faster. You can Google it and figure the details out. To me, what was more important was Hilton is committing to 10 million hours of volunteer time dedicated to Kiwanis International. This is an exciting opportunity for this club, I believe, because there's no other club, there's no other Kiwanis club around here, and there's a Hilton in Ocean City. There's a real opportunity, I think, also to create an internship program with a key club. So we've got a ripe opportunity to connect with volunteers through the Hilton Connection in Ocean City, and also potentially create internship opportunities for our key clubs. I thought this was great. So the advice that we got was contact the general manager at Hilton as a first step. And then I have a business card from the person at Kiwanis International who's kind of running that program and connecting with Hilton, and the Hilton person. So if there's an issue in terms of receptivity from the Hilton Hotel here in Ocean City, we've got the name of the person we can call to make sure that they understand they have to commit to the 10 million hours and do the work. Business meeting. So to me, one of the most important reasons why we were there wasn't necessarily to connect with Kiwanians and to learn, and we did that, and that was a lot of fun, but to represent the club at the business meeting. This was like no other business meeting I'd ever seen. It was a giant conference center, convention center. In this room, I've seen political conventions on TV, and that's what this reminded me of. People had to sit in their region. There were signs. People were promoting candidates for various offices with folks running around with T-shirts. I can't remember the names. But I was having fun meeting people. There's the Capitol sign. But that gives you a sense of what the room was like. Very sophisticated voting devices. If you know, the meeting went on for 3.5 hours. And if you had to use the restroom, you had to check in your voting device as you left the room and then pick it up again when you came back in. Very sophisticated. They had us testing the voting device, so they were quizzing us, and I think this was Kiwanis International's way of getting information about what we thought, and that went on for a good 45 minutes, so anyway. I've got some slides of the presentation that was given. So I took some pictures of slides that I thought would be helpful so you could get a sense of what Kiwanis International is up to these days. Most popular club service activities, community events, by far are the most popular, a holiday event and food backpacks. Those are the top 3. So they've polled all of Kiwanis International. These are the top 3 popular club service activities. Kiwanis Club is sponsoring SLP clubs. We've got Key Club is the most popular, Builders Club, K-Kids, and then a few other ones underneath that. Most popular club service activities. Oh, there we go. Neonatal tetanus, sorry about that. Neonatal tetanus, I know this has been a big focus of Kiwanis International, and so to me this was really compelling. You can see 2000, there was 200,000 cases down to about 30,000, 31,000 in 2017. So significant impact on a pretty critical issue based on the work that Kiwanis International has done. Membership. So this was an interesting, eye-opening situation for me. I had not realized that Kiwanis International was struggling with membership as much as they were. You can see it's been on the decline for many years. 2017-18, first time they've had positive membership increase in quite a while. The other thing I got out of the business meeting is there's a lot of competition with Rotary. There were several changes to the bylaws, and people were standing up and saying things like, well, the Rotary does it like this, so we should do it like that. So I guess Rotary's growing, and Kiwanis isn't growing quite as much. New clubs, so we do have a few new clubs coming in. 1 year ago, they were at 219, now they went 256, so there's some growth happening, which I think is a positive sign. And then I got to do a fun little selfie with this guy. Who knows who that is?
It's not Mark.
No, it's not Mark.
And Mark would like to know.
Ralph?
No,
Ralph?
that's not Art Riley.
Ralph?
It's not the Pope.
It's not the Pope.
No, it's not the Pope. This is the new guy that was voted in on the board at Kiwanis International, who represented this area.
Okay, he's on the board.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
yes. And I did not write down his name. I just figured Ralph would know. Anyway, I got a quick little selfie with him. And then just to wrap up, Mark and I are always meeting new friends. This is one of our favorites from the photobombed us. And again, we just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to go. We really enjoyed ourselves. We had a little bit of fun. We learned some things at the same time. Any questions?
Yeah.
Karen?
I'm curious to know whether or not anybody at that convention meeting asked KI why they had not launched a global TV commercial solicitation to help with wiping out tetanus. And one of the things that I've had a problem with is that they ask the clubs to do this huge thing, which is great, but they don't do anything to promote the need globally. But that didn't come up.
No, that didn't come up. It didn't come up in the business meeting. I don't really think that would have been the forum for it, because there was a lot of sort of Q&A around trying to get a sense from the folks in the room what they thought on a couple of topics as a mechanism for testing the device, the voting device. The voting device was a little complicated, I will admit. And then they got into bylaw amendments, and so folks were sort of promoting different word changes and language changes to the bylaws. So the business meeting didn't really create the opportunity to do what you're suggesting. I don't recall seeing a session on neonatal tetanus, but that would have been an opportunity there. There were several sessions on, the role of the president or the role of the different officers, and that might have been another opportunity to branch that or to launch that question. But in the business meeting, I I didn't hear that, and I didn't really see an opportunity for it either.
I talked to Art 3-4 months ago, and that's what when he becomes president, that's what he's gonna try to do, create a worldwide, public relations. So that's what his initiative is.
Does any of it include advertising who we are? Because nobody knows what Kiwanis, I didn't know.
He wants to get out the message as to what we do, so he's pretty plain.
I just think of advertising.
Ralph, did you have a question?
Yeah, you're speaking about the partnership with Hilton. We would never know. Do you think that the general manager over there at the Hilton Ocean City is familiar with that partnership with International?
I'm not sure, that's why I have the business card for the Hilton person who gave the presentation at the session. And the session was kind of misdescribed. It was couched more in terms of how to travel successfully. And Hilton's got this partnership with Kiwanis, so I thought it'd be more a suggestion on travel tips and packing trips and their tips and those kinds of things. So I was surprised to hear this volunteer opportunity. But I do have the card of the person who was giving the presentation, and because I asked him exactly that question. I said, well, what happens if we're having trouble getting them to participate? He said, call me. So that's what I would do, is reach out to the general manager, and then if there's not a lot of receptivity, and I've got his business cards, first name's Chris, give Chris a call and see what you can work out. That to me, that's a ripe opportunity worth jumping on sooner than later.
And that's for key clubs.
No, actually, they have to put in 10 million hours, worldwide, right? So my point is, they're committed, required to volunteer, and there's an opportunity there. I think it's up to the club to determine what's the best way to work with them. And in the presentation, somebody suggested potential for internships. So I think there's a real opportunity there. I'm not familiar with the kids in the Key Club, but if you think there's a potential there, then I would pursue that. But it doesn't have to be that or exclusively that. If you've got a community project that you want to work on, for example, I know there's some discussion around whether or not we should get a car and sell raffle tickets. Well, if part of the issue is we don't have enough people to work the booth to sell the tickets, Hilton could help you with that, right? Because if they've got a ripe bundle of volunteers, then I think that's the pitch. This is the need, here's what we need you to do. If there's a bigger needs that the club has, then I would point them in that direction. Was there another question here?
Yeah, certainly the Key Club members at the high school level especially are a lot of those people are headed off to college, okay? And I understand that when you go to college, there's about a zillion questions that you might have, you may not have even thought about until you get to where you're landing, opening up a bank account in that city, or from who your roommates are gonna be to where you get your 3 squares a day. And the idea of maybe, and I assume that some of these universities and colleges have Kiwanis presence in that town, especially geared towards the college experience. Do we make any effort to try to guide those people and say, hey, look, if you're going to University of Maryland or Penn State or something like that, these are the people you want to contact who are with Kiwanis Club at your school, so they may be able, you instantly have friends, everyone wants to fit in, plus the fact that they might be able to help you with starting up a bank account or something like that, tell you what's the best bank to go to. And that, do we keep up with these students well after they go to college, or if they're going out to the workforce, to say, hey, you can join this club now. And if you think it's a bunch of old fuddy-duddies, change it, okay? Ask your friends to come, ask your folks, and remember, some people are going right out to the workforce, they're gonna get married, they're gonna have kids, and last time I looked, that's what we're all about. So if you wanna get involved, and then you can have your 4-year-old and 5-year-old get involved with my wife down at Chow or over at Buckingham or something like that, then, in other words, keep the pump primed. Do we do anything like that, or could we do anything like that?
yeah, could we, I think, is, the answer to that is, from my perspective, yes, but I don't think I'm the best person to answer the do we question. I would defer either, I guess, to Dick or to Ralph on the club's past practice in that area. I don't know, Dick or Ralph?
I'm sorry, I missed.
Well, I mean, in terms of following, Roy, I mean, we haven't really followed scholarships, other than giving them out. We haven't followed the people, other than the feedback that we've gotten from the folks.
They regard it as scholarships.
Yes.
They regard what, did they get say, like what?
Well, how they, how they're progressing through college,
So he was asking specifically, do we follow up with those key club students when they get to college and connect them with a Kiwanis club close to where they're going to school?
I don't think we've done that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We haven't.
Okay.
Because after they,
Yeah.
once we give them the scholarship, so we haven't tracked where they're, what they're doing. Some of the kids are not even in the ski club, they're in the scholarship.
Yeah, yeah. Many of them are.
Okay.
I know when I was in college in Philadelphia, one of the Kiwanis clubs or somebody that was of a higher status for Kiwanis in that area came and started a Circle K at our
Mhm.
college. So there are people that do follow up with the universities.
Okay.
Try to get the club going there and make sure people come out and start membership in clubs once they've graduated.
Okay. I saw a question, Ralph?
Yeah, I don't know what has happened over the past years, but, I can go back to maybe between 5 and 8 years ago. Membership worldwide for Kiwanis was doing very well. And to the level where they even set a goal to meet 1 million members. If I look at my paperwork at home, and we were edging toward, was actually picking up members year by year, trying to get that 1 million members. Then all of a sudden, after that, within 2 years after that promotion was sponsored by International, things dropped. And membership started falling, and it's been falling ever since, as you said
Yeah.
earlier, that we are struggling, for membership.
Yeah,
I
so
don't know what happened there.
do you remember when the time was for that promotion? Would it have been in 2006 or 7 or 8 or somewhere in
Possibly.
there?
Possibly somewhere there,
'cause my-
but we were really picking up members worldwide.
Yeah, my theory is the traditional model, which is sort of what the club reflects here, where folks come and have breakfast and hang out and socialize and talk about community projects, was the standard model for volunteer organizations for quite a while. And companies used to encourage and pay for the memberships as well as give their employees the time to do the work, the volunteer time to do the work. My personal assessment is, since 2008 in the recession, that's gone. And the next generation coming up is feeling a lot of pressure to work all the time, and because of the way that social media and all of the sort of electronic devices we've got, you can pretty much work all the time. So there's that expectation that they're trying to meet. So this opportunity to come and have coffee and connect, for that generation, I don't think means the same thing. Plus, they can't really get the permission from their employer to do it this way. So I think part of what Kiwanis International is trying to do is adjust to what I would call like the changing market of their, changing needs of their volunteers. And I think it's a smart move. So my guess would be that that promotion probably got tanked because of the economy. Companies just don't seem to be doing that in terms of supporting volunteer work like they used to. They're just going about it a little bit differently. Any other questions? Dick?
Well, I think what Tim was suggesting is a good idea, and I think you ought to talk to Roy about that. And, my last question is, what were your and Mark's, favorite ride at Disney?
I really enjoyed Splash Mountain. But one of my all-time favorites is the Haunted House too, so those would probably be my two favorites. I don't know, Mark.